Good evening, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to this day of the Digital Day in Lugano. We will talk with our guests with the digital future in mobility. I'm Francesca Cellina of SUPSI, and I will present you the guests who are sitting next to me. Rolf Brügger, Director of the Public Services area in Deloitte, Switzerland. Agostino Ferrazzini, President of the Società, Navigazione del Lago di Lugano. Roberta Cattaneo, Regional Director of the SBB Railways, the Swiss Railways for Ticino, and Andrea Prati, the CEO of Aziende Industriali di Lugano, Industrial Companies of Lugano. I would like to start giving the floor to Rolf Brügger, who will present the results of a study made by Deloitte, published a few days ago, on how our society, and especially Switzerland, can transit to a low-carbon print society, so decarbonisation, basically, and related to mobility. Rolf, the floor is for you for your presentation. Good afternoon to everyone. Thanks for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to come back here where I studied and where I learned my Italian. Today I represent Deloitte, the main company of consulting services and revision services for public services, public and private companies. Today we will be talking about sustainable mobility. It's a very hot topic, as the international conference COP26 in Glasgow shows us, as well as the referendum on total revision of the law on CO2 of June this year. For us, for Deloitte, this is a strategic topic to improve the attractiveness of our country. The result of the referendum showed that the strategies to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement on climate, halving the green gas effect emissions by 2050 is the goal of the federal government, the zero emission for 2050. All these goals have to be revised. Despite the results of the referendum, 70% of respondents of a survey we conducted in May this year thinks it's important or very important to avoid the production of CO2 emissions. And 57% chooses the transport mean that is less polluting. So the question is, what are the measures that the respondents believe more desirable and more realistic to reduce emissions by 2030? 68% is moving the trading traffic from road to railway. Since Switzerland is leader in this field, the result could also be influenced by willing to see roads more free and not only for ecological reasons. Moreover, we see higher probabilities of success in electrification of vehicle fleets and the promotion of electrical cars. This despite the problems to adopt infrastructures, charging infrastructures, the high cost of electrical vehicles, and the concerns due to the dismantling of batteries. On the other hand, it's not very likely that private and public airway fares will decrease, so people don't think there's much potential in the airway trafficking. The respondents, moreover, expressed expectations on behalf of their employers to reduce emissions due to the employees in mobility areas. 76% is in favor of support for public transport, the promotion of electric mobility and bicycle as transport means to go to work. Also, they support video conferences, the flexible bonus of mobility for those who don't use a car to move, and the car sharing and carpooling. Just a quick remark on video conferences. During the pandemic, it's been proven how they effectively replace the job journeys. However, not for all the companies, it's clear that they can move on online platforms. Therefore, in future, we'll need tools, training, and technological supports that are more efficient. So what is the best way to reach the ambitious goal of zero emissions by 2050? It's a set of approaches that are complementary, like a balanced mix of political measures and a cultural change as well. But for this cultural change to take place, it's important that citizens feel the need and are convinced about it. According to our research, the driver of change also goes through technology. Hence, we have to promote innovation, new business models, and mobility concepts, adapting the actual offers of goods and services for the audience, and having competitive pricing like the mobility pricing. In Ticino, we have two nice examples of how the climate challenges have been tackled with sustainable mobility solutions. I refer to the first electrical boat with quick recharge that crossed the Lugano lake, and the Ticino ticket for public transport, which is free for tourists who stay in hotels. I used it as well. Anyways, every one of us is responsible as a consumer, collaborator, and passenger to try to reduce emissions. And the digital transformation is functional for this purpose, is a unique opportunity that the public sector cannot miss. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Lugano Living Lab, for organizing this digital day in Lugano. And we'll have the debate afterwards. Thank you very much, Rolf, for introducing the subject. We can start from some hints you gave us during this presentation to hear the opinions and the initiatives, what is happening on the territory on behalf of the important players we have here. I would start with navigation. We saw that Rolf was mentioning this example of the boat, and mobility is in your mission as a navigation company, but you have a strong interest for mobility, for sustainable mobility, electrification projects. Can you tell us something about what you're doing? Yes, sure. The first success is a big boat, 80 tons boat, the Ceresio boat, which has been electrified. This is the first step of what we would like to do. In fact, our project is called Project 2035. So it started in 2020, and it wants to get to 2035 with the electrification of all the boats of this navigation company of the Lake Lugano. Clearly, we don't just have the management of the Lugano Lake, but we also have a bit of Lake Maggiore, where we don't have property or own boats, but we rent them from the Italian government. We have 5 boats that are rather big in Locarno, and these boats somehow will have to be replaced or retrofitted with innovative propulsions. So there's much to do on the Lugano Lake, on the Maggiore Lake, but I believe we've made the first steps. A very important aspect is that such electrification, this change, this decarbonization of lakes cannot be faced alone. That's why we managed on Lake Lugano to create a nice team around SNL, the navigation company, where we could have technical partners such as IEL with Andrea, who supported us in developing the 2 recharge stations on ground. Because in Lugano helped us the universities like SUPSI with projects that calculate in real time the saved CO2, and 2 weeks ago we reached the first ton of CO2 saved. It's a beginning, thanks to the Ceresio boat that has the same performance as the previous boat. That was a diesel, 168 power horse. We have now an electrical engine, 180 kilowatts. We have batteries, about 6 tons of batteries on the boat. That once we can recharge them once we have the recharging station. So we will be able to recharge all these batteries in about 20-25 minutes. But then we were talking, what are we going to do with these batteries? The life cycle is ensured by the manufacturer for 10 years. They are lithium batteries, and at the end of the cycle, these batteries will not be disposed, but they will be put in the main port, where we will create a big, huge battery that can be used for buses, for leisure motorboats, and many of them will be electrified, for bicycles. So we will create on the lakeside this electrical conjunction between city and lake. I believe that what started is not the electrification of a boat, but the electrification of the lakes. This morning, as I said before, we had guests here in Lugano, all the technical heads of Swiss navigations, and they all came here for the presentation of the Ceresio boat. And I have to be honest and say that this could be the beginning to give all the lakes a touch of what could be the future of decarbonization, the realization of this decarbonization. We have been studying this for a while. Since 2016, 2015, we have been working on the power. In fact, we created the first small boat. It dates back to 1908. It's been refurbished and it's completely electrified already in 2016 with a quick recharge, a 30 kilowatt engine, which is not big, but it's the first example of this kind of boats, and it's the first license we received in this field. So this is an example, one of many examples, but in fact it's our contribution. So in a nutshell, we have technology, we have rentability, we have the team, which is getting more and more consolidated. So we just have to keep going on with this commitment and create the whole fleet. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Not just your project, your specific project, but the broader vision, the complete electrification of mobility and the integration with citizens who move around the town, who would be able to use the batteries as well to recharge their own transport means. Now I will ask Andrea Prati what's the standpoint, the perspective of the electricity companies. So is this dangerous for the companies who provide electricity? Well, good evening, first of all, to everyone. I would start with a joke. Well, I hope that it will be more worrying for oil companies, because it will mean that electricity is increasing. So I would rather hope they are concerned. Clearly, the decisions made at national level regarding energy and climate policies have to influence our sector, which is changing importantly. This push to more sustainability translated in finding solutions that are not nuclear energy are challenges that are huge, especially in a sector that is used, has been used for over 100 years to be sitting on certainties. Certainties given by a market that is basically determined by monopoly and by the availability of energy, quality energy, which was also abundant. So this sector doesn't only want to change, but is necessary to change. To these internal elements, we have to add the international impacts, especially at European level. I'm not a pessimist, but it looks like they're changing the role of our country from leader of this transnational energy trading. It seems to be more on a second level in a stormy sea. So from this viewpoint, we have some stimuli that need to find strong solutions. And in this sense, the task of a company like ours is based on two basic points. First of all, finding the way to make available in the right quantity the energy necessary to meet the annual demand of our clients. I'm talking about the country first of all, but secondly, making available in every single moment the necessary energy to make the country work in that specific moment. With the increase of renewable energies, this is the challenge in the challenge. I believe, to stick to today's topic, that one of the answers could be or has to be found in the digitalization process. In this big framework of digitalization, surely also transport digitalization is part of it. I don't want to dig too much into the topic, but I think about 4 points plus one, which has to be a clear commitment of the electricity company. First of all, I think about the development of predictive models about consumption that are more precise, that can lead in a targeted way the production, the availability of necessary energy through regulated sources. Secondly, the development of smart systems to manage the networks, the grids, that allow in the right moment and for the right time to deactivate and reactivate every single equipment according to priorities and according to the availability of power at that moment. A third point is the chance to store the energy that we produce, and Agostino already made a great example, namely batteries. Even if they're not finished, but during the life cycle on the boats, like during winter with little traffic, little navigation on the lake, these boats are not working, so these batteries can be recharged with a photovoltaic system. So in that case, and this energy could be available for other transport means, so we could have a battery where we could draw the energy to regulate the grids, which is very important to reach an even more interesting balance on the grids using even more renewable energies. Saying today that electrical mobility should not be promoted because of the disposal of batteries, I think this is undermining a transformation process that has to happen. We have wonderful examples about what we could do or not with the disposal of materials, but in the majority of cases, these materials have been disposed in a sustainable way. But there's always those people who think they're smarter and think their interest is more important, so they dispose in a way which is not adequate. So this small percentage of people should not be the cause of giving up a process that is needed. So we should use this opportunity. I also believe that we could develop intermodality systems on demand, trying to develop making available the most adequate transport mean to meet that specific transport demand. And all of this, especially thinking about the regulation of grids, the introduction of equipment, the use of batteries around the territory, this cannot make without the development of a pricing system that can enhance at best the availability of the citizen, of companies, of public bodies to have their equipments activated and deactivated, and therefore capitalize such a capacity for the country. I believe this is our task, namely creating the framework conditions so that these solutions can be implemented. Thank you very much. So you're not concerned at all, you're very decisive with a very clear vision on the roles of the company, but also the elements to leverage for the transition. I would like to go on to a sector that has been electrified for a long while, at least in recent times, railway, public transport in general. With this pandemic that we experienced, there's been a decrease in users. We are going back to normality. Your data confirm that we're going back to the situation we had before, or has something changed? It's not the same situation as before.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I would like, however, to introduce myself something else. As the railway system in the Ticino region, we are working on a project with the new hydroelectric plant, which is 75 owned by SBB and the rest by the region. And we are going to use that to have all our public transportation railway system in the region work. So we are quite on the cutting edge. We are independent, and the example of this project is an excellent example of what the future might look like for mobility to be even more carbon-free in the future from this point of view. To answer your question, well, yes. Well, the pandemic, okay. But I would like to kick off from a different perspective, because public transportation has always been believed to be the place where the pandemic spreads out. But actually, I'm quite annoyed by that, because public transportation is not at fault in this sense. There is no higher possibility to fall ill on public transportation. Of course, people are more aware. You have to wear masks. People disinfect their own hands. I've always traveled by public transports. I haven't taken a nose swab for 20 months now. So we must be clear. It's not stirring terror towards someone or something that you help the cause of the pandemic. Yes, we suffered a drop. If I'm thinking about March 2020 to June 2020, Agostino can confirm that. We had 4 timetable changes in 6 weeks, something like that. So you can imagine that out of all Switzerland, what this means. This is not only the management of the railways, the carriages, the trains. You can imagine what that entails. However, guaranteeing transportation for those who could not move around with their own private means, or moving around goods that were necessary in the region, not only food, of course, but also the pharmaceutical materials. So from this point of view, I really congratulate all my colleagues, because even though that was quite a crisis period, they could guarantee public transportation to all the people in the Ticino region. Public transportation is now regaining ground, particularly here in the Ticino region, and I'm particularly pleased by that. Of course, it was also positively supported by Swiss tourism. Many of our friends from both French-speaking and German-speaking Switzerland have rediscovered the Ticino region with the Ticino ticket, which is not for free, but there are other taxis, tourism taxes that finance that, because it's a production, so it has to be paid. And this is important to underline that, because I don't think I've ever got anything for free. This fact of people coming back to us makes me particularly happy. At national level, we are getting to 75% compared to pre-pandemic times. In the Ticino region, we are exceeding 90%. As regards the commuters' traffic, I don't know whether I answered your question. Well, yes, as a user of public transportation, I see this growth, this comeback, but actually I wanted to be confirmed in this view by you, because you have the data to confirm that. Now, I would like to ask Rolf Brügger. A question. From your presentation, you showed the role of digitalization for mobility, but can we think that in broader terms to the role of digitalization in public transportation? Can you tell us something about that? Yes, sure. As Andrea said, digitalization as the basis for a system of sustainable mobility is paramount. For us, the question, of course, is much wider. The digitalization of public services in general in the public sector, how much this has to be digital. It could be SBB, but also for the utility companies on the lake in general. What we have to consider is that of course, we will see the development in Europe. However, Switzerland is quite below average as regards the whole infrastructure, and digitalization is no exception. For us, in general, it is important to try and enhance our own position for all the agents and for sustainable mobility as well. We have wondered, why don't we have more digital services? Why don't the Swiss adopt other digital services in a quicker or more flexible way? This can be an idea about how to develop the services with the citizens. During a survey we conducted last year for the first time and this year for the second, we've seen that there are only 3 aspects that are paramount. Also, when services and digital products are produced, the first thing which is to be acknowledged is the trust towards digital services offered by the public sector has decreased. People last year and during the pandemic have lost their trust. We have to work on the safety and the cyber risk. I'm again thinking about that as regards sustainable mobility. This is paramount. The second remark is that the demand for these services is quite high. It's not that people don't want them, but they are not feeling that safe and sound as regards the consumption of these services. Third remark, again very important for all of us, the foundations have to be strong. Unfortunately, in Switzerland nowadays, we don't have an electronic identity which we can all use, and this is really fundamental for us as a country and for sustainable mobility as well. Well, these 3 dimensions are fundamental. If we think about new products and services also in the field of sustainable mobility, well, I believe they are really very important and they have to be taken into account when working. Thanks, Rolf. Now, I think we have a few more minutes for a quick last round of questions. Andrea, Prati, as regards digitalization, how much is the power system in Switzerland electrified, and how is AIL working on that? Well, I'll be very, very quick on that. Well, considering what I said, so the starting point is a sector that has been accustomed to living on certainties for years, but we are at a good level, definitely. We are getting equipped. We have to pay attention to one thing, that is the development of our own services and products to clients, particularly those that interact with our own electrical systems, as Rolf said pretty well, we are generating some weak points on the network, and we have to pay attention for these weak points to be appropriately monitored to avoid any attacks that could compromise the functionality of our network. So when developing products and services, this is our focus. I told you before what we mean by products and services. However, we have also a number of projects developed currently more towards the inside of our own company, and we have mainly working in two fields. First, trying to grow in digitalization with the organization of our own work, particularly as regards the realization of our own work by looking for models to attribute work and deliver the materials to our teams all over the territory for them to be more efficient, to work in a more quality manner, and to avoid unuseful moves around the territory. The second item we are working on is our attempt to be more digital in the interaction with our main stakeholders. And I'm thinking particularly to our clients, to provide them with more comfort and quality, but also the assemblers and installers were working on our gas and water networks, allowing them to speak more freely and more precisely with us, thus providing an even more higher quality service to our clients. What we should actually do is trying to develop these ideas based on even more stable and stronger partnerships with the excellences we have on our territory. And I'm thinking particularly to the universities, the technological partners that are currently living in this territory and that are very rich in skills and ideas. Very well, thanks. Well, while you were speaking, I was wondering, but as for sustainable mobility, do we really need only digitalization or shall we need something more? What's your view as SNL? Do you have any plans for the future of mobility? Well, digitalization is surely very important for the navigation system. An example now, the electric engine of the Ceresio boat can be x-rayed and monitored from Nuremberg, where it was produced. As a matter of fact, any anomaly can be seen, detected. Of course, then you will need a technician on site, but it can be detected and the alert can be sent from remote. This means that there is a strong part of digitalization in the electrification of our own system. As regards additional developments on sustainability, of course, the lake must be seen as a communication route, not so much as a new form of public transportation, but we must go back to our own tradition. If we consider 100 years ago, we were moving about 1 million people on our boats on the Lake Lugano. About 100 years ago, we had the concessions of a railway system from Menaggio to Porlezza that connected the Lugano Lake to the Como Lake to reach Ponte Tresa, where we had the concession of the route from Ponte Tresa to Luino, hence connected the Lake Maggiore. You see how this integrated system 100 years ago can be rediscovered nowadays to recreate an integrated system with the navigation system, the railways, the roads. And we are trying to do that also with the first green lines, Lugano, San Rocco, Gandria, which we opened on November 2. But we also did that trying to contribute to the connection of Porto Ceresio station. And now we are connected in Morcote. I think this is suboptimal. It's a smart thing to be made and done, which is Station Porto Ceresio, boat system Porto Ceresio, and the Melide station. That would bring us southwards towards Milan and northwards towards Bellinzona, so going elsewhere, everywhere. Very interesting. So you've got an infrastructural development plan for the next future, right? So now again, this side, Roberta, Cattaneo, you are quite keen on infrastructures. You've finished this year, well, at the end of last year, but this year you have really implemented that, the new Ceneri tunnel system, and you have completed the transit project. Are you going to stop now, or do you have any further developments for the next years? Well, no, we have to organize the small harbor close to the station in Melide. This is a project we are following, which is hard for us. We work on the territory. We have never finished with infrastructures. Additional projects will be starting next year, but these projects mostly relate to enhancement and modernization of the infrastructures, not only railways, but also the stations. I'm thinking about next week. We are renewing the Chiasso station, Biasca, Mendrisio. So we are doing lots of things. But if I think about inter-exchange stations, transportation on roads and railways, and also the use of bikes, well, this helps individual mobility for it to be customized. In October, we launched the Verzasca Mobile project. This is an on-demand bus transportation project, which is quite innovative, particularly for valleys where public transportation has some physiological limitations. So this kind of project can help keeping our valleys alive. The inhabitants can exploit it. And this is an example of great excellency. And then digitalization is also experienced in all our scopes of action, not only on our app, where you can actually have a look at the timetable, buying tickets with major discounts, but I'm also thinking about what we are doing as for diagnostic, hence the maintenance of our own carriages and trains and the planning of staff. Think about all the operators on the trains, those working in the stations and plants. So digitalization is fundamental. So you are not going to stop? No, definitely not. Well, none of you is actually going to stop. It seems no one of you seems to want to slow down. So as a closing note, Rolf Brügger, we've talked about technology, innovation, digitalization. What are the unifying factors that you imagine we should somehow further promote, or which we should point to? What's your final remark for the future on that? Well, if we try to summarize what we have discussed about, and we go back to the beginning with the net zero goal within 2050, and now we put these three elements together. We've got digitalization, technology, and also infrastructures. In our survey, we also included 3 areas that show how these 3 areas have to be seen together to develop strategies to attain the net zero goal. So, as Andrea said before, our first item is the new products and services that have to be developed with the customers based on a digital base, which is to be sustainable. So products and services we already had, but those new particularly, and these elements have to interact. Second, According to the interviewees, the key point, this move of commercial routes from road to railways. As we heard before, there are several initiatives to ameliorate the system from hub to hub as the SBB. And maybe the next step here in the Ticino region too would be the distribution, a more granular distribution in the city. I believe this is to be a whole set of infrastructure, digitalization, and new technologies. And last but not least, electrical mobility in the Ticino region, which is to be very strong. We have already talked about the challenge of battery disposal, but also the recharging infrastructures and additional aspects that have to be considered within the general system with smartness to become successful. Maybe this is a summary of what we have talked about with the results of our own survey, and I believe this is pretty in line. Your survey is pretty in line with the goals and the initiatives already underway by our own panelists tonight. I would close. I think the time we have available is finished. Really, thank you for attending this session and for attending us maybe through the streaming flow. Thank you, Andrea Prati from AIL, Roberta Cattaneo from SBB, Agostino Ferrazzini from SNL, and Rolf Brügger from Deloitte, Switzerland. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the session. Thank you.